Well, I thought I had finally found one of my bucket list cars when I came across this 1973 Pontiac Grand Ville for sale. You see, I've been searching for one of these for a little bit, or ever since I've seen the movie The Seven Ups, with an awesome car chase between a Admiralty Blue 1973 Pontiac Grand Ville four-door hardtop and a Pontiac Ventura. This car obviously wasn't an Admiralty Blue, which is effectively a navy blue car, but I thought that its beautiful Florentine red poly color was just so fitting for a big vehicle like this. And I have to admit, I got especially excited when I saw this car for sale. Candidly, I would have been happy with a two-door hardtop or a four-door hardtop, but the four-door hardtops of this body style I really enjoy because you can put all the windows down, you have complete open air cruising. And for those who've been watchers of this channel for some time, you may know that I already have a 71 Pontiac Grand Ville, and I just love the big full-size Pontiacs. This 73 Pontiac Grand Ville would have been the penultimate year for the model, as 1974 would be its last model year, and then in 1975, Pontiac would revert back to the Bonneville Brougham, being revert back to the Bonneville and then a special trim level, the Bonneville Brougham being the top-of-the-line car in full-size form. So the Grand Ville only lasted for the 1971 to 74 model years, a very short run. And despite the supersized front bumper here on the 73, I do think it's a handsome car. I like the front as well as the rear, which we'll talk about in a second. And like I said, when I saw this for sale, I was quite excited. So aside from the 7-Ups movie, why was I excited by this particular vehicle? Well, I do think that it has a cool style about it. I love how the grille, as an example, in the front spills out underneath the headlights and even wraps around the front part of the vehicle there. It's just a kind of menacing look with a very prominent area that protrudes out, that so-called Pontiac arrowhead-like form in the center of the vehicle. And this car is also a very highly optioned car. You can kind of see it, but this car does have the rare cornering lights that are in front of the front wheels there. I don't think I've actually seen another 73 Grand Ville with the cornering light option, but as we walk around the car, you'll see that it has a number of other options as well. Now, turning to the rear of the car, this is one thing that I thought Pontiac really got right for 73. The 71, 72 rear ends were attractive, but I thought the 73 rear end was very attractive with these linear tail lamps. And then I also loved how Pontiac integrated the reverse lights into the quarter panel, just continuing the sheet metal form there. I thought that was a great touch and a great accent piece. And of course, the beautiful Pontiac arrowhead. So the rear end on this, I thought, was also just quite distinctive, and, well, it accentuated the width of the vehicle, because that's what you want to do with a car that's 80 inches wide, accentuate its width even more. And here was yet another reason why I loved the 73 Grand Ville, is the interior, which was all new. Well, I guess I shouldn't say all new, but a lot of things were new for 1973. They spent more money on the interior. Lots of fake walnut wood everywhere. You can see it there on the door panel, just a big old hunk of fake wood, as well as on the dash. And then the seats had a new pattern to them. They had this button tufting and like a diamond pattern on the seat back. There was this embroidery on the center armrest. And the fabric just had, as you can see in this picture, this beautiful sheen to it. It looks like it's very rich and expensive. It doesn't have all that great of a hand to it. It's a little bit rough, to be honest. But it wore very well, and I thought it just looked fantastic. And that handsome look carried over into the rear of the vehicle as well. Notice the fabric sheen here. You can also see that, well, interesting looking faux walnut on the door panel. And take a look at the cigarette lighters in the seat backs as well. So you have to be able to smoke in your 73 Pontiac Grand Ville like any vehicle, but I think this car had certainly at least 3 cigarette lighters and then an ashtray for every passenger. So you can just smoke your way to some sort of illness. As we turn up front, the sunlight kind of cast an unfortunate glow on the carpet here, but that is just the sunlight. The carpet was not faded at all on this car. In fact, the interior was pretty close to perfect. The only flaws I would say is the wheel had a bit of discoloration. That was really just grease. I think that would have come out with a Mr. Clean Magic eraser. The dash was perfect. The seats were perfect. Carpet was perfect. Headliner was perfect. This car also has, if you can see, a tilt wheel. It has cruise control. It has automatic climate control, which was a pretty rare option on the 73 Grand Ville. Automatic climate control was first introduced on Pontiacs in 1965 and Cadillacs in 1964. Cadillac had it as a one-year exclusive. This car also has the super rare gauge package that you can see on the left pod there. There's a series of gauges that surround the clock. That was optional. You generally just got idiot lights as standard equipment. And then you'll notice the speedometer also has a trip odometer. On the door panel, you can see the car has power windows as well as power locks. And yes, both of those were indeed optional in 1973. Your Grand Ville could come equipped with crank windows and just manual locks. And notice that there's a little hole at the top of the dashboard with a vent in it that's right above the passenger compartment space. That's for the automatic climate control to sense the in-car temperature. In case you were wondering, that did not appear on the non-automatic climate control equipped vehicles. And here's a look at the driver's door panel, which was in great shape, except for a few little fingernail scratches around the door handle, but you'd expect that. This car had about 40,000 miles on it. Door panel otherwise in excellent shape. The pull strap is great. I did think it was very strange how Pontiac integrated the remote control for the outside rear view mirror. All the other pull straps have symmetrical metal attachments, but here, for whatever reason, they thought it was cool to just integrate the remote control for the outside rear view mirror into the front end of the pull strap, and it looks quite strange. But notice, you can see that faux walnut element, I guess you want to call it, of the door trim panel and how it's got a fake carving associated with it. It is just over-the-top 1970s glory. This interior was done by a designer named Blaine Jenkins, who was responsible for the 1972 Oldsmobile 98 Regency and that big loose cushion look interior before he was moved to Pontiac around this time. And he did the interior of the Luxury Le Mans. I believe that was the first Pontiac that he had a hand in. And after the Luxury Le Mans, he turned his artistic abilities to the 73 Grand Ville to jazz up the interior and make it a little bit more high class and higher quality than what was previously in the Grand Ville for 71 and 72, which, if I'm honest, was rather unremarkable, even if you got the optional Grand Ville luxury interior in those years. And under hood, this car was especially clean as well. You can see Pontiac's 455 cubic inch 4-barrel V8 here, the largest Pontiac V8. And it made 215 horsepower in standard form in 1973. If you got dual exhaust, you got 250 horsepower. So big difference, 35 horsepower just from the exhaust systems in 1973. And this one was very well preserved. You can see the under hood area looks, well, not new, but it looks very original and complete and clean. The cruise control box there is on the driver's side. And you have the GM Frigidaire A6 air conditioning compressor there on the passenger side, which, believe it or not, was working and blowing cold, charged on R12 refrigerant. So I guess then the question becomes, why didn't I buy this car? I looked it over quite thoroughly, and the car had been repainted, but I would say the paint job on it was pretty good. It was not a bad paint job, and it would have taken a buffing very well, and I think would have looked not necessarily new, but extremely good. It looked to be in good shape as it was, but if the car were buffed, I think that the exterior paint would shine even more. The vinyl top was in great shape. The glass was all in good shape. The interior was in great shape. The seats, the dash, the top of the instrument panel, the headliner, you name it, the carpets, the interior was also in nice shape. However, the driving experience, when I went to go test drive this car, was just an utter letdown. And why was that? Well, first I noticed that the engine wasn't running all that smoothly, something that could be corrected by a tune-up. It's hard to say if it was an ignition issue or a carburetor issue. I think it was a little bit of both, because the engine was hunting a little bit and it had a hesitation off idle. So that's usually a carburetor issue. So that was one thing, but that was curable. If that had been it, then I probably would have still bought the car. But the exhaust setup that was on this car, somebody had dual exhausts on it, and I don't know if the person ordered it originally. The original owner ordered it that way from the factory. Somebody did it after the fact. Not a big deal, but they weren't secured well, and they were clanging to the car. And then on top of that, the front suspension also had some clunking noises to it, likely upper control arm bushings, which are very typical. I mean, they're 50 years old now. It's not a big deal, but again, not cheap, because you got to replace the upper control arm bushings and you have to realign the front end. And it's not an easy job on these cars either. So those were toast, and the front suspension was clanging a bit as I drove it. So that wasn't a good starting point. You got the engine that wasn't running well. Transmission did shift very well. Rear end was quiet. Car handled well. These Grand Villes by this year actually have a rear stabilizer bar. Pretty thick one too, shockingly thick. The 71 Grand Ville that I own has no rear stabilizer bar. So I have to say I was pretty impressed actually with the handling. But the clunkiness of the exhaust and the front suspension was a total letdown, coupled with the poor performance of the engine. And then what really sealed the deal for me was that all 4 doors required extremely high efforts to close. All of them, all 4 of them. I don't think I've ever seen a GM car of this era where all 4 doors required, like, you had to slam it to actually close it. And interestingly, they didn't feel like the doors were sagging all that much. I didn't notice that when I opened the door, like some other GM cars that I've owned of the era, that the doors just sagged and came off of the door striker. So I don't know if it was something else going on. Maybe they just needed to be lubricated, but it just required an intense amount of effort to get the doors to latch, way more than I've ever experienced in another GM car of the era. And if it had been 1 door, fine, but it was all 4 doors. And then I tried the automatic climate control system. The air conditioning actually worked and blew cold, but as I moved the little thumb wheel up and down for the temperature, I noticed that it was not switching modes. The heat was not kicking on. It was not blowing out the heater vent at the bottom. And interestingly, when you moved to defrost, the air did come out the defrost, and you moved it to bi-level, the air came out the bi-level, moved it to vent, came out both places as well. But neither the fan speed was altering up or down, nor was the mode door moving. So it wasn't switching between the vent and the heat automatically. And there's no other way to get the heat to kick on than for this automatic climate control system to work. So something was going on with the automatic climate control setup that it wasn't working. And I'm not familiar with the automatic climate control in these cars. Like in the Cadillacs, it's just 1 box. In the later years, it's that you can replace. It's the HVAC programmer. But not clear to me what was employed on this 73 Grand Ville. And I also noticed that I drove it, the dash had a rattle, and I believe the top pad had been taken off at some point. Likely somebody was trying to service this HVAC setup and didn't have any luck. So the front suspension was rattling, the exhaust was rattling, the dash was rattling, the doors didn't want to close, the engine ran horribly, and it was, honestly a heartbreaker. I really loved the car. I really thought that I was going to buy it, and sometimes this happens. And the hard part here is I know I'm likely not going to find another 73 Grand Ville in great shape. But I just can't, let's say, buy this one knowing I'm probably going to have to spend, I would guess, $4,000 maybe on fixing all the various things. That was my best estimate at the time. And I don't even know, because I couldn't get the heat to kick on, is the heater core even good? There's no way for me to test that. And, well, that's, let's just say, not a cheap job on these cars either. I didn't notice any staining in the carpet, so it's probably good. But one thing that you can do when you test these is always put the heater on hot and full blast and then smell the air that's coming out of the heater vents and see if it's got like a syrupy smell. If it does, that'll at least tell you that the heater core is starting to go bad. And you can imagine on a car that's over 50 years old now, heater cores going bad are relatively common. So for all those reasons, I passed on the 73 Grand Ville. What would you have done? Again, a heartbreaker. I love the color. It cosmetically was in quite nice shape. Yes, it was repainted, but it was done, it appeared to me to be done well. The underside of the car was very clean. The rockers were clean. The frame was clean. There was no rust on it that I could discern. All the quarter panels and the area underneath behind the front wheel was all super clean. So that was all good. Cosmetically, I would say the car was in generally good shape. Would have looked near new with the buffing. But mechanically, just an absolute heartbreaker. Let me know what you would have done. What do you think of the 73 Grand Ville? Thanks again for watching.